Hey everybody, as you can tell we are inside because winter is upon us up here in New England, but the quicker it starts, the quicker we can be out back on the water. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about a rod series that I was able to use this year and explain some of the features about this rod and about the features because you're starting to see it more and more in other rods that St. Croix has come out with. You know, I've been a big fan of St. Croix rods for many years. They're in the rod building industry. As a matter of fact, they're the biggest rod manufacturer in North America. That's their job, and they do a great job at it. And the rod series that I was fortunate enough to be able to use this year is their Elite Series rods, specifically the Bass Series Tournament Legend series of rods. It's a blue rod. It's really nice looking split cork handle. Great feel, but there's three specific features that are incorporated into this series of rods. And like I said, you're starting to see these features elsewhere in their other rod series. And I just wanted to explain what each of these features meant and what that meant during the rod process and how it benefits us as anglers as far as what we're looking for out of a specific fishing rod and how can it improve us out on the water and how we can get most out of a rod for the money that we're spending on it, because that's typically at the end of the day what we're looking for. So when you first start building a rod, every rod manufacturer needs a tool known as a mandrel. It's a piece of metal that actually mimics the shape that they want their rod blank to look like. It's a real thin piece of metal, and it tapers from the butt end of what the blank is going to be, and it gets real thin up near the tip of the rod. And it essentially is the blueprint for what they want their blank to look like. And that is basically the foundation of every rod before they start building it. Now, St. Croix is unique because they have machines that allow them to be able to make their own mandrels. Most rod manufacturers actually contract out other companies to build mandrels, and they buy them from those companies. St. Croix is unique in the fact that they build their own. So not only do they design them, but they can manufacture their own mandrels, leaving them wide open and limitless to what they can design. The problem and reason why most rod manufacturers don't go the same route is because they're extremely expensive to manufacture. But it's good for St. Croix because, again, as far as research is concerned and the ability to do what they want to do in the directions that they want to head with a new series or improving the existing series of rods is really limitless on that end. But the very first feature of this rod is called IPC, and it stands for Integrated Polycurve. Now, back to the mandrel, basically when you have this piece of mandrel, they wrap what is known as pre-peg. It's material that wraps around this mandrel over and over and over again, and as the layers build up, that's essentially building the wall of your blank for your rod. They add resin to that, they cook it, and you have your blank. The mandrel, like I said before, tapers from one end to another. And if you've ever seen a mandrel, at each of these tapers along the long mandrel, the tapers actually look like a stair step down. It angles down once it gets to a certain angle at the bottom, it'll angle off again. So it almost looks like a stair step. And it does this several times throughout the length of the rod or the length of the mandrel. And what that does is it actually creates weak points in the rod when the blank is complete. You don't see them because they're actually inside the blank, not on the outside, because by the time all the material is put on and the rod blank has been smoothed down and painted, you'll never see these imperfections. They're actually still on the inside. If you've ever bought a brand new rod that has no fractures, no cracks, nothing, and you've gone out fishing for the first time and set the hook into something and there's just a clean snap and you've never been able to explain it, that might be one of the reasons why it did something like that, is because of these weak points in the rod. Now what IPC and integrated polycurve means is it is one continuous taper from end to end of the mandrel. So there's no stair step, there's no weak points in the rod whatsoever. It's one continuous curve from tip to tip. So as you're building that rod blank, what does that mean? It basically means once the blank is completely done, you're going to have smoother action in the rod. You're going to have an increased strength in the overall rod because you're not going to have those weak points. And the rod, basically, once it has a full load on it, it's not going to know where to break. It's not going to have that weak point or multiple weak points as it would in other rods that have been manufactured around mandrels that have these weak points. And it's also going to give you a greater sensitivity through the overall rod once the whole thing is complete and put together. Now, moving on in the rod process, as the layers of pre-peg, which is the material that wraps around the mandrel, is being put on, there's another feature called ART, and what that stands for is Advanced Reinforcing Technology. And what that is basically, if you've ever seen carbon fiber, it's almost thinner than paper, but it's extremely durable, it's extremely strong. And as they get to certain layers of pre-peg, they'll incorporate layers of this carbon fibered material into the layers of pre-peg as they're wrapping and going through the process of the rod building. And this material is extremely strong, and it actually it makes the rods 10 times stronger than what they would normally be, but because they're so paper thin, it essentially adds no more diameter to the rod blank itself and essentially no weight. So you're getting this 10 times strength for basically no thickness and no weight increase, which, why would we say no to that, right? And basically, when the rod is completely done, you're going to have increased strength from the butt of the rod to the tip of the rod. So what that means is from your hook set, you're going to generate more power. You're going to continue that power through fighting the fish all the way to the boat. And especially you're going to have increased strength around these hoops. So as the line travels through all these hoops, they're typically a weak point in the rod because a lot of stress gets put on each of these hoops. And especially over time, they can wear right in these areas. And that technology is going to help to prevent wear in those areas, and it's going to give it that added strength that it really needs. And the very last piece that I want to talk about today is the last feature, which is FRS, and what that stands for is Fortified Resin System. And what that means is if you've ever gone to the store and you are looking at rods to pick out, and let's say you grab one off of the shelf, and one of the very first things that everybody likes to do is they like to hold the rod and they like to look straight down it and see how straight it is. And you can go to anywhere and test this out. I guarantee you, if you look at some of the rods on the shelf, especially lower end rods, you're going to see that some of the rods are not completely straight, and they're actually at the very tip. Typically, it's going to bow out to one side. Why is that? This is why. It's because in the rod building process, after the pre-peg has been wrapped, the resin has been put on, the resin has to actually be cooked in an oven to be able to completely bake and solidify and basically have your rod blank complete so the rest of the components can be put on. And during this cooking process, there's an amount of heat and cooling that is involved in it. And if any one of those processes happens too quickly, that is what causes the bows in the rods. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's making the rod weaker by that, but what it does mean is that it leaves you with a rod that is not 100% straight and dead on like it should be. So it may wear differently over time, and it certainly isn't going to give you that castability and sensitivity that you're looking for, and you're going to lose your hook set power and your handling power that you're looking for out of a rod. Now what ARS means is at St. Croix they have special ovens that are all computerized, so when these rods are getting ready to go into the oven to be cooked, during the cooking process both as the temperature is being revved up and as it's being brought down and being cooled. It is all computer driven, meaning that the heating and the cooling is controlled in steps and in increments, so nothing is happening too quickly either way. So it's not being heated up too quickly and it's not being cooled too quickly. And what that does is it prevents any of the blanks from bowing in such a way that as they come off the production line and they're being put up on the shelf after everything's complete, you're going to have these imperfections in the rod. And it's just another way that St. Croix goes above and beyond and are pushing the limits to really produce the best product and the best rods out there. And that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed fishing with these rods, and I'm sure I'll have a couple more on the deck of my boat next year. And if you haven't made all of your fishing resolutions yet for 2015, I encourage you, if you haven't yet, to check out St. Croix. They're a great rod company. They've been around for a while. Like I said earlier, that is their job and they're good at it. And if you haven't, for 2015, get yourself one of these bad boys. It's the Legend Elite Series Bass Tournament rods from St. Croix. We'll see you in 2015. Guys, have a good, safe winter. Hopefully it's short, and we'll see you back out on the water next year.